The human sat in the glow of the screen, heart thumping with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. They had been scrolling through countless auctions and listings, searching for something extraordinary, when a tiny line of text caught their eye. A planet for 25 cents. Their first thought was it had to be a mistake or some kind of scam, but the image of a barren world floating in the darkness of space was undeniable. The curiosity that had driven them through countless adventures and experiments flared like a fire in the chest. Their fingers hovered over the mouse, hovering between hesitation and reckless daring. The number flashed again, 25 cents, the idea that someone, somewhere, had put an entire world up for sale at such a ridiculous price seemed absurd yet irresistible. They clicked on the listing and a page opened with a simple description. The planet was dead, lifeless, barren, some faint traces of past civilizations, but nothing that could endanger the buyer. At least that was what the seller promised. The human leaned back in their chair, imagining themselves standing on the surface, a lone figure gazing across cracked plains, stretching endlessly under a dark sky. No one had been there for centuries. Yet now, it could be theirs for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. A thrill ran through the human, a mix of greed and adventure, a sense of history waiting to be touched. They could almost feel the wind on their face, the crunch of dust beneath boots, the echo of silence so complete it pressed against the mind. They hesitated for a moment, thinking of all the stories they had heard of explorers and adventurers who had chased strange discoveries only to vanish or return changed, but the pull of the impossible outweighed caution. They clicked buy. The transaction was instantaneous and final. A small confirmation window blinked on the screen. You now own Planet K517. The human leaned back, breathing rapidly, heart racing at the enormity of the moment. 25 cents, and the universe had just shifted beneath them for the first time. It felt like they held the weight of a whole world in their hands, and yet the planet itself remained a distant shadow across light years away. The human stared at the confirmation screen, imagining what it would be like to arrive, imagining the silence, the emptiness, the secrets waiting to be uncovered. They packed equipment and essentials into the ship, checking and rechecking every module and sensor, each calculation precise yet tinged with the thrill of the unknown. The countdown to launch felt like eternity, each second stretching like an elastic thread, as excitement and fear wove together into a strange rhythm. They thought of previous owners. They imagined them laughing, perhaps careless, perhaps brave, perhaps foolish, yet all vanished. Now it was their turn to step into the story, to become part of the mystery. They strapped themselves into the cockpit, hands gripping the controls, heart hammering like a drumbeat in the chest. The engines roared alive, light flooding the cabin as they broke free from the familiar orbit and soared into the vast emptiness. Stars stretched in every direction, a glittering web of possibilities and danger as they glanced at the coordinates for Planet K517. A tiny speck among countless celestial bodies, a dead world waiting to reveal its secrets. They imagined the silence waiting for them, the barren landscapes that had not felt life in centuries, and yet perhaps were not as empty as they seemed. A shiver ran down their spine, a mix of anticipation and unease. The human could not shake the feeling that the planet had been waiting for them, waiting for someone foolish or brave enough to come and see. The human felt the ship shudder as it pierced the thin atmosphere of Planet K517. The barren surface stretched endlessly beneath them, a gray, cracked expanse broken only by jagged cliffs and deep gashes in the earth. The engines hummed and vibrated through the cabin, a reminder that the familiar world of home was now impossibly far away. They guided the ship down slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile crust that seemed to moan under the weight of their landing. The moment the landing gear touched the ground, a cloud of dust rose and settled over the hull like a ghostly curtain. The silence was immediate and absolute. Even the hum of the ship seemed to vanish into the heavy stillness. The human unstrapped themselves, heart pounding in anticipation, stepping onto the cracked soil and feeling the chill of centuries without life seep into their boots. The horizon stretched in every direction. Nothing moved, not a single bird or insect or whisper of wind. The sky was an angry gray haze streaked with faint purples and greens. The light refracted in strange ways, creating illusions of movement just at the edge of sight. The human took a deep breath, the air thin and metallic, tasting of iron and ash, every inhalation a reminder that they were utterly alone, yet somehow not quite alone. They began to walk across the planet. Slow, careful steps, kicking up tiny clouds of dust with each footfall. The ground cracked beneath them, sometimes collapsing into small pits and fissures that glowed faintly as if the planet had veins running beneath its surface. Their eyes scanned the horizon. Structures appeared, jagged ruins, half buried in the soil, remnants of buildings and towers that must have belonged to someone long gone. The shapes were strange and alien, but there were signs that they had been crafted with intelligence. Tools and machines left scattered as if the owners had fled in a sudden panic. The human knelt to examine a piece of twisted metal, its surface etched with markings not like any language they knew, but symbols that seemed to move and writhe as if alive. A shiver ran down their spine as they realized the planet was telling them something, a story encoded in stone and rust and dust. Days they moved further. The silence became oppressive, the weight of it pressing on the chest like a living thing. Every sound they made seemed too loud, their own breathing echoing like thunder. The human caught a flicker at the corner of their vision, a shadow, perhaps, or a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched made their heart race. They quickened their pace, careful to stay alert, scanning the ruined landscape for any sign of movement or danger. The further they went, the more the ruins seemed to grow older and more twisted, as if the planet itself was reshaping the memories of those who had lived and vanished. There a low rumble vibrated through the ground. The human froze, scanning the horizon. The air shimmered faintly, heat and energy, moving just beneath perception, and then all was still again. Only the human remained standing on the gray, cracked earth, a lone figure in a silent world that held secrets and warnings in every crack and shadow. The planet waited, watching, knowing that the first steps had been taken and that the story of the next owner was beginning. The human walked deeper into the dead landscape, every step echoing faintly through the empty air. The ruins grew denser, now shapes of towers, leaning at impossible angles as if the planet itself had twisted them in agony. The ground was littered with fragments of machines, gears, wires, and shards of glass that reflected strange colors in the dim light. The silence was so complete that the human could hear their own heartbeat drumming in their ears. The air felt thicker, colder, as if each breath took more effort to draw in the suit. Senses flickered occasionally, strange readings pulsing across the display, temperature shifts, radiation spikes, nothing that made sense. The planet was dead, and yet it behaved as if something beneath its surface was alive and restless. They paused near a broken structure, its walls covered with symbols burned into the stone. The marks glowed faintly like embers beneath ash. The human reached out and brushed their fingers across them. The stone felt warm, almost like skin. A faint vibration traveled up their arm and they pulled back, startled. The light dimmed immediately, as if the planet had reacted to the touch. The human looked around, uneasy. The sense of being watched had returned stronger. Now it felt like eyes were on them from every shadow, from every broken wall. Moving cautiously, they entered the structure. Inside was darkness so thick it seemed to absorb the light from their torch. Dust hung in the air in long, slow trails. The floor was covered in old debris and something that looked like shattered glass bones, or both. The humans stepped carefully, the sound of their boots crunching underfoot echoing like whispers. In one corner they found an old console, a control station covered in grime and rust. They wiped it with their glove, and faint lights flickered to live screens blinking in colors they did not recognize. The system was still functioning. Somehow the human leaned closer, reading symbols and graphs that meant nothing, yet felt strangely familiar. The shapes pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat, as if responding to their presence. The sound came soft and distant like breathing, but mechanical. Though human froze, listening, every muscle tight. The sound grew louder, steady, deliberate, something moving somewhere behind the walls. The temperature dropped, the air colder and heavier with each second. The torch flickered once, twice, then steadied. They turned slowly, scanning the shadows. There was nothing visible, only that sound, a rhythmic hiss and exhale like a great machine sleeping or something imitating breath. The human backed toward the exit, unease turning into fear. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive, with veins of faint light running through them. The symbols on the door glowed brighter as they stepped outside the ruins. The ground beneath their feet trembled once, then went still. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying a faint metallic scent and a whispering sound that almost formed words. The humans stopped trying to listen, but the whispers vanished, replaced again by silence. The ruins loomed behind them, and for the first time, the human realized they were not ruins at all, but remnants of something that had once been alive. The human stood staring at the horizon. The planet stretched, endlessly silent, cold and waiting. Yet beneath that silence there was motion and intent. The planet was not dead, it was sleeping. The humans stood at the edge of the ruins, breathing heavily, the air, thin and sharp against their lungs. The silence had returned, but now it carried a different weight, no longer empty but filled with listening. The strange warmth of the symbols was still lingered on their fingertips like a pulse that did not belong to them. They turned slowly, eyes scanning the horizon, and caught sight of something glinting in the distance, a faint shimmer of light half buried in the dust. Driven by a pull they could not explain, they began walking toward it, each step crunching over the brittle surface of the planet. The light grew brighter as they approached, until they realized it came from a structure smaller than the others, more intact, its walls smooth and curved as though shaped by flowing water instead of handstay. Brushed away the dust from a narrow opening and stepped inside. The air within was colder, darker, filled with the faint hum of energy. The walls were lined with panels that pulsed faintly, a soft blue glow running through veins of metal and stone. The human raised their light and found strange writing etched in spirals around the room, repeating patterns that seemed to twist into themselves as if refusing to be understood. In the center of the chamber stood a cylindrical device, cracked and half buried yet still active, its core glowing faintly green. The human knelt beside it, running fingers across the surface, and a spark of light flared to life. The chamber filled with a low tone that vibrated through their bones. A holographic projection flickered above the device. A figure materialized, faint and ghostly, humanoid but wrong somehow. Two tall limbs, too long, face smooth and featureless. The human stepped back, heart hammering, as the figure moved slowly, turning toward them. The sound that followed was not speech yet. Meaning flowed through the human's mind like cold water. The message was simple and filled with dread. "You should not be here." The human froze, staring at the projection. The voice continued, each word forming directly in the mind. "We built this world to contain what we could not destroy it. Sleep still, waiting for minds to wake it. Do not wake it." The hologram shimmered violently, the form distorting as though struggling against interference. Then it steadied. One last phrase burned through the air. "They came before you. They woke it. They are part of it now." The light dimmed, the figure's outline breaking apart into 1,000 fragments that drifted like dust before fading. Completely, silence returned, heavy, suffocating. The humans stood there, unmoving, breath shallow, chest tight. The words echoed again in their mind. "They came before you. They are part of it now." The thought clawed at their mind, filling it with unease and wonder in equal measure. They turned to leave the chamber, but paused, noticing something on the floor near the base of the device, a metallic object half buried in dust. They bent down and brushed it clean. It was a small badge, tarnished with age, marked with letters in their own language. A name and serial number engraved faintly. Human, not alien. It was a sign someone from their kind had been here before. A chill spread through the human spine. They stepped back, heart racing. The air around them trembled faintly, and for a moment they thought they heard whispers again, soft and pleading. "Do not stay." The human ran from the chamber, dust rising behind them like smoke as the ground pulsed faintly beneath their boots. The planet had remembered them, and it was beginning to wake. The human ran until their breath came in ragged bursts, the silence of the planet broken only by the echo of their footsteps. The ruins stretched endlessly behind them, but the sense of pursuit did not fade. It grew thicker, heavier, as though the air itself carried unseen movement. The horizon shimmered faintly under the pale sky, shapes flickering in the distance, too fast to focus, too far to name. The humans stopped trying to steady their breath, but the feeling of eyes pressing against their back made stillness impossible. The wind rose suddenly, dry and sharp, carrying whispers that were not wind words, forming and dissolving before the mind could grasp them. The human turned slowly and saw the shadows move. They were not shapes or creatures, only darkness that shifted in unnatural ways, stretching thin across the ground, then pulling back into the cracks between stones. The human's light beam cut through the air, but the shadows seemed to avoid it, sliding away in silence. The ground beneath trembled softly, like something beneath the surface was breathing. The human took a cautious step backward, hand hovering near the sidearm. Though no weapon felt useful against whatever this was, the planet was not empty. It was aware, and it was remembering. They began walking faster, eyes scanning every corner, every flicker of light that might betray movement. The ruins loomed around them like broken teeth, the silence returning, but now filled with an invisible rhythm, something beating deep underground in slow, steady pulses. The humans stumbled across a cluster of abandoned equipment, ancient and covered in dust. Machines built by human hands lay shattered and burned, their insignias still faintly visible, suggesting a mission long erased from official records. The human knelt, brushing dust off a small tablet screen, cracked and lifeless. The words etched into the casing were brief but chilling. Do not touch the core, do not listen. The wind rose again, hissing through the ruins, carrying faint laughter that made the skin crawl. The human looked up sharply. The shadows had returned now, more defined shapes forming from the shifting dark. Like silhouettes of people, tall, thin, and silent. They did not move closer but stood unmoving. At the edges of sight, their forms quivering like reflections on disturbed water. The human called out, voice breaking across the empty air, but no sound came back, only more whispers too faint to understand. They turned and began to walk quickly, then ran, boots pounding against the brittle surface, the planet beneath them pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The light above dimmed as clouds of dust and energy gathered across the sky, turning everything gray and colorless. The ship was still visible for, in the distance, a small, gleaming shape half hidden by haze. The human fixed their gaze on it, the only sign of safety, and began running harder, but every step felt slower, heavier, as though the air thickened with unseen hands pulling them back. The shadows followed, not fast, not frantic, but steady, patient. They did not chase, they waited. The humans stumbled near a ridge, the ground giving way slightly, revealing dark tunnels. Beneath, glowing faintly with green and blue light, the whispers were louder, now forming fragments of words. Leave, return, sleep. The human clutched their helmet, trying to block the sound, but it came from within their own thoughts, weaving through memories that were not theirs. The planet was speaking through the minds of those it had taken. They climbed the ridge, panting, eyes wide, as the wind stopped again. Sudden, absolute silence. The shadows vanished as quickly as they had come, leaving only stillness. The humans stood trembling, looking out over the endless dead plains, knowing with a sinking certainty that they were being tested, that the planet was learning from their fear, and that the vanished owners had never truly left. The humans stood at the edge of the ridge, breathing hard, the faint light from below pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. The air felt heavier now, filled with a low vibration that seemed to hum inside their bones. They stared down into the dark opening, the glow shifting between green and blue and gold, as if the planet were breathing through light. Curiosity burned through fear, the need to understand pressing harder than the instinct to run. The human knelt slowly, testing the edge before lowering themselves into the tunnel. The walls, smooth and cold like metal and stone, fused together. The descent was steep, narrow, and filled with the sound of their own breathing, echoing back at them from unseen depths. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became, faint steam rising from cracks that glowed faintly beneath the surface. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber. The ceiling, lost in shadow, columns rose from the ground, glowing faintly with veins of energy that pulsed in time with the human's heartbeat. Machines surrounded them, ancient, strange, built into the walls themselves, as if the planet had grown around them rather than they being placed there. The human approached one of the machines, brushing away centuries of dust to reveal markings similar to those on the ruins above. The shapes twisted in strange loops, impossible to follow yet somehow familiar. The planet was trying to communicate, but its language was older than thought. Humans stepped carefully across the chamber until they reached what looked like a control panel. It flickered faintly as they approached. Reacting to their presence, a symbol appeared, glowing white against the black surface. It was not alien at all, it was human. The same insignia that had been on the tablet above appeared here, stamped into the heart of the planet. A deep chill ran through them as realization began to dawn. This planet had been touched by humanity before, not discovered but abandoned, left behind for reasons erased from every the control panel responded to their movements, lines of light running outward through the floor, connecting to every column. The hum deepened, the ground shaking faintly, dust falling from unseen places. Above, the human tried to step back, but the light had already spread the entire chamber, now pulsing alive like a great heart. Waking from centuries of slumber, the walls rippled faintly, the air thickening with energy. The light formed patterns in the dust, shapes that looked like faces, fleeting and distorted. They spoke without sound, words forming directly in the mind, fragments of warning and sorrow. We built this place to hold what we could not end. You must not wake at the human stumbled back, eyes wide, the words cutting through them like cold steel. The columns pulsed faster, the hum rising to a pitch that filled every corner of their mind. They turned to run, but the tunnels behind them were gone, replaced by a seamless wall of light. The planet was closing around them, shifting, sealing them inside. The humans screamed, soundless in the heavy air pounding against the wall, but the light absorbed everything. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the vibration stopped, the chamber stilled, and a low voice filled the silence, not words, not language but something deeper that spoke directly into the human's thoughts. The question was simple and terrible. Why did you return? The humans stood trembling, the glow dimming around them. They realized they were standing not in a machine, not in ruins, but in something alive, the planet itself, aware, sentient, waiting, and now fully awake. The humans stood frozen in the stillness, heart thundering as the glow from the columns faded to a low, dull shimmer. The air around them vibrated softly, carrying a sound that was not quite a voice yet filled the chamber with meaning. The question echoed again inside their head. Why did you return? The human tried to speak, tried to form words, but the air seemed too thick to carry sound. They stepped backwards slowly, eyes dotting across the vast chamber, searching for a way out, but the walls pulsed faintly alive, shifting with each breath. The glow deepened, and from the far corners of the chamber shapes began to emerge, faint at first, then clearer with each passing heartbeat. They were not solid, not alive in any familiar sense, forms of light and dust shaped like people hovering above the cracked floor. Faces formed and faded, features stretching and twisting before solidifying into something almost human. Their eyes glowed, faint blue, hollow and endless. The humans stumbled back, breath shallow as the shapes turned to face them. The air grew colder, a chill seeping through their suits, straight into the skin. The figures moved slowly, surrounding the human, in a circle without sound, without motion of air. Each of them radiated something ancient, not anger but Srotha. First voice entered the human's mind, not through ears but directly into thought. We were here before you. We came to study. We came to build. We came to claim. The human felt each word like a weight pressing on their chest. The figures flickered, their outlines breaking apart, then reforming. A second voice followed, softer, trembling. We thought it was dead. We thought we could use it, but the planet is alive. It remembers every thought, every touch, every death. The human tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The light from the columns pulsed brighter, the chamber filling with a deep hum that made bones ache. The faces around them began to shift again, merging, breaking apart, their forms twisting into streaks of light and shadow. One figure drifted closer, its face clearer than the rest, eyes filled with faint human recognition. The human saw the badge still pinned to its ghostly chest, the same design as the one they had found above a name. Faint and flickering, the realization hit like a blow. These were the owners, the explorers, the builders, the ones who had vanished, their bodies gone but their minds absorbed into the planet, bound forever within its endless memory. The figures, the voice was low, mournful. It does not let go. It keeps what it touches. It learns from us, from you, from all who come. The humans shook their heads, stepping back, terror rising in their throat, but the circle held firm. The voices grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of sorrow and warning. Leave before it knows you. Leave before you become one with us. The hum became a raw light exploding outward from the columns. The figures reached toward the human, hands of light brushing against their suit, filling the mind with images, flashes of cities falling, of stars burning, of endless silence swallowing everything. The humans screamed, but the sound was lost in the noise. The planet pulsed once, twice, then stilled again. The figures faded slowly, leaving only the faint whisper of their final words. You cannot save what does not want to be saved. The human collapsed to the ground, gasping. The chamber quiet once more. The faint glow pulsed beneath the surface, steady and slow like a heart returning to sleep. The human understood now. The vanished had never left. They had become part of the planet. Their consciousness dissolved into its endless memory, and now it knew the human's name. The human rose slowly, trembling legs, weak as the last flickers of light faded into the floor. The air was still again, but it carried the weight of 1,000 voices whispering at the edge of thought. Their mind felt crowded, full of echoes that were not their own, fragments of memories, images of faces and landscapes they had never seen. The human pressed a gloved hand against their helmet, trying to shut it out, but the whispers flowed through like water, unstoppable. The planet had reached into them. It had seen them. It had begun to learn. He stumbled toward the far side of the chambers, searching for a way out, fingers brushing the smooth surface of the walls that seemed to pulse faintly with warmth. Each touch sent another rush of sound through their mind, pleading words, warnings, cries of fear and sorrow. The human closed their eyes, breathing hard, trying to focus on the memory of the ship, the metal, the air, the sky, the way home, but the planet whispered back, offering something else. A promise of understanding, of unity, of belonging to something vast. And then the ground trembled faintly, as if the world itself was breathing faster. The light underfoot brightened again, tracing lines that ran toward the center of the chamber where a pit began to open wide and slow, a spiral of glowing energy. Spinning downward, the air filled with a low tone, deep and hypnotic, drawing the human closer step by step despite every instinct screaming to run. The voice returned not from the ghosts, not from any direction, but from within the human's own thoughts. It spoke in calm rhythm. You are curious, you are brave, you are like those who came before. Stay and you will see what they saw. Stay and you will know what they knew. The human shook their head, backing away, the pit's glow reflecting across their visor. They could feel the pull of it in their chests, like gravity, like a heartbeat syncing with their own. Every instinct fought against it. They reached for the weapon at their side, raising it toward the light as if it could make a difference. The planet laughed softly, not in cruelty but in pity. You cannot fight what you are part of. You cannot unlearn what you have touched. The ground trembled again, dust falling from the ceiling. The tunnel they had entered through began to reopen the walls, groaning as if reluctantly releasing them. The choice lay before them, clear and terrible. Step forward into the pit and become part of the endless, or flee and carry the planet's memory forever. The whispers of the ghosts returned, faint, desperate. Leave before it knows your soul. The human hesitated, heart racing, torn between the hunger to understand and the primal need to survive. Then the tremor grew stronger, the chamber shaking violently, light flashing white, blinding. The human turned and ran stumbling through the tunnel as it collapsed behind them. The whispers rose into screams, the voice of the planet calling their name over and over, echoing through every thought. The human did not look back. They climbed and crawled through the narrowing passage until at last the gray sky broke above them. The world outside looked unchanged, silent and cold, but the air itself felt aware. They stood gasping, chest-heaving eyes scanning the endless plains. The planet was still now, quiet again, but the human knew it was only waiting. The connection was not broken. The planet had seen them, and through that sight it had left something inside them. The human stood under the dim gray sky, trembling, every muscle weak, lungs burning from the stale thin air. The silence of the planet surrounded, and once more. But it was no longer empty. It was heavy with memory. The ground beneath their boots still pulsed faintly, as though something deep below continued to breathe. They turned toward the horizon, where the ship waited, a distant gleam of metal half hidden in drifting dust. They urged to run, to escape, to leave the planet behind, burned in there. Just stronger than fear, stronger than exhaustion, they began to walk, each step slow and uneven. The wind picked up, whispering across the plains, carrying sounds that might have been words, or only echoes of what the mind feared to hear. The human tried to ignore it, but the voices grew clearer, fragments of sentences rising and falling. Stay, we remember you belong here. They gritted their teeth, pressing forward, refusing to answer, refusing to listen. The ship grew larger with every step, its hull coated in fine dust from the planet like a film of ash. The human reached the ramp and stopped, staring at the open door, hesitation crawling through their veins. What if the planet would not let them go? The ground trembled lightly beneath their feet, the same slow rhythm that had followed them since the chamber below. They looked back once across the vast landscape and saw faint shapes standing at the edge of the horizon. Shadows of the lost owners, tall, still watching. They raised a hand, slowly, a gesture, neither threat nor farewell, only acknowledgement. The shadows did not move, they only faded into the dust. The human stepped into the ship and sealed the hatch, hands shaking as systems came alive. The screens flickered once, twice, before stabilizing. The engines hummed faintly, a comforting sound after the long, heavy silence. They lifted off slowly, the ship rising through the gray haze, the planet shrinking beneath them. The humans stared down through the viewport, watching the ruins fade into mist. The pulse of the planet seemed to echo in their mind one last time, soft and distant, not hostile, only patient. They thought of the holographic warnings, the ghosts, the voices, the light of the pit, and realized the truth. The planet had never been cursed or haunted. It was alive, a vast memory built from the consciousness of everything that had ever touched it. And now it carried one more voice, theirs. As the ship broke through the upper atmosphere, light filled the cabin, bright and clean. The human felt the pull of gravity fade, the engine shifting to the hum of open space. The planet hung below them, silent and small, yet its presence pressed against their thoughts like a distant heartbeat. They set a course away from it, their hands steady on the controls, but the whispers had not stopped entirely. They were softer now, calm, almost gentle words, not of warning but of farewell. You will return someday. Human sat back, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. They told themselves it was imagination fatigue, the residue of fear and tension, but deep inside they knew the truth. The planet was not done with them. The connection had been made, and in some quiet place between stars and thought, it was still watching, still listening, still waiting. The Yuan looked once more at the shrinking world, a gray scar in the void, and whispered without meaning, to some places should never be owned. Some mystery should never be answered, and yet we always return. This ship vanished into the dark, the dead planet, silent below, but its pulse continued, slow, steady, eternal, a heart that would never stop beating.